We have entered the Sol system. The voice of Fleet Commander Vaylor echoed through the Golden War Chamber as thousands of alien officers stood in silence before the massive hologram of Earth. Blue oceans, white clouds, primitive orbital defenses, one small moon. The entire chamber laughed. This was the species that had disrupted Zarvath trade routes for 3 years? These emotional bipeds were supposed to be dangerous? Vaylor narrowed his eyes at the image rotating before him. Humanity had only recently entered interstellar space. Their colonies were young. Their fleets were small. Their technology was crude compared to the empire that had ruled half the galaxy for 12,000 years. And yet, 3 Zarvath patrol fleets had disappeared near human territory. No survivors. No distress signals. Only silence. We expected warriors, one admiral said with amusement. Instead, we found farmers with engines. Another officer smirked. Their military records show constant internal wars. Humans kill each other more than any known species. Exactly, Vaylor replied calmly. Which is why they will collapse quickly. The chamber nodded in agreement. To the Zarvath Empire, unity was perfection. Obedience was strength. Emotion was weakness. Humans possessed all 3 flaws. They argued constantly. They disobeyed authority. They fought with rage instead of logic. Primitive. Predictable. Doomed. The hologram shifted as Earth's outer defense satellites appeared across the display. Vaylor barely paid attention. One opening strike, he ordered. Destroy orbital command. Disable communications. Force surrender before planetary resistance forms. Yes, Commander. The Empire had done this hundreds of times before. Arrive. Overwhelm. Occupy. Move on. Entire civilizations usually surrendered the moment Zarvath warships appeared above their worlds. Most species broke psychologically long before the first bombardment ever began. Fear was efficient. Fear saved resources. Fear built empires. But humans did not react correctly. A transmission suddenly appeared on the command screen. The signal came directly from Earth. No encryption. No delay. An old human male sat in a dimly lit room wearing a simple military uniform. His face carried wrinkles instead of fear. Behind him, alarms echoed faintly. The officers in the chamber waited for surrender terms. Instead, the old man smiled. If you're hearing this, he said, then you ignored every warning. Several alien officers exchanged confused looks. The man leaned closer to the camera. You think humanity scares easily because we fight each other. He paused. That was your first mistake. Vaylor's expression hardened slightly. The human continued calmly. For thousands of years, every nightmare imaginable already happened on Earth. World wars, nuclear fire, economic collapse, plagues, dictators, famines, extinction events. The room grew quieter. We survived all of it. The transmission flickered as distant explosions rumbled somewhere behind the man. And now, he said softly, you brought the entire galaxy's biggest empire directly to the one species evolution specifically designed for impossible situations. Signal terminated. For the first time since entering the system, nobody laughed. One younger officer finally broke the silence. Commander, should we interpret that as a threat? Vaylor stared at the dark screen for several seconds. Then he turned away dismissively. No, he said coldly. Desperate prey often creates theatrical final statements. The chamber relaxed again. But deep inside Vaylor's mind, something small had shifted. Not fear. Not yet. Just irritation. Humans were supposed to beg. Instead, they sounded prepared. Far below, Earth's night side glowed with millions of lights as civilian evacuation ships launched from major cities. Human fleets began repositioning across the solar system in strange, scattered formations. Not defensive clusters. Not strategic walls. Chaos. At least that's what the Zarvath believed. Primitive disorganization, Admiral Serac scoffed while observing human fleet movements. Their formations make no tactical sense. Vaylor studied the data. Human destroyers moved independently instead of in synchronized patterns. Cargo ships traveled alongside military carriers. Entire squadrons vanished behind moons and asteroid fields without explanation. No consistency. No order. No logic. The perfect example of an inferior species. Begin the assault. The Zarvath fleet moved instantly. Over 8,000 warships advanced toward Earth in flawless formation, darkening space itself as gravitational engines shook the system. Massive carrier vessels deployed drone swarms while orbital cannons powered to full capacity. It was overwhelming, absolute, unstoppable, and humanity answered with silence. No speeches, no surrender, no negotiation. Earth simply waited. The first orbital station exploded 12 minutes later. Then another. Human satellites vanished one after another beneath precise Zarvath firepower. Massive defense platforms burned across the upper atmosphere as debris rained into the oceans below. Billions watched the invasion begin. Across Earth, people crowded into underground shelters while emergency broadcasts flooded every screen. And still, humanity did not surrender. Vaylor watched carefully. Any moment now, panic should begin. Civilian riots. Military collapse. Communication breakdown. That was how lesser species reacted to overwhelming force. But human transmissions remained strangely calm. Traffic control still functioned. Military coordination remained active. Even civilian evacuation channels continued operating with disciplined precision. It made no sense. How are they maintaining stability? One officer muttered. Vaylor ignored him. Deploy ground suppression forces. Thousands of invasion carriers descended toward Earth's atmosphere. That was when the first human fleet disappeared. Not destroyed. Gone. Entire battle groups vanished from scanners near Saturn's orbit. Admiral Serac frowned. Retreat. No, Vaylor answered slowly. Humans do not retreat efficiently enough for that pattern. Another officer suddenly turned pale blue. Commander, we lost contact with monitoring Fleet 7. The chamber shifted uneasily. Cause unknown. Vaylor's eyes narrowed. A fleet did not simply disappear. Especially not a Zarvath fleet. Reconnect communications. We're trying. Seconds passed. Then minutes. Nothing returned. Finally, a damaged signal burst across the chamber speakers through layers of static and screams. What remained of Fleet 7's commander appeared covered in blood. Behind him, fires consumed the bridge. They came from inside the debris field. Static. Human ships don't follow engagement protocols. Explosions thundered. They rammed us. The transmission cut violently. Silence filled the war chamber. Several officers stared in disbelief. Rammed? Someone whispered. That tactic was unthinkable. No advanced species sacrificed warships intentionally. It was irrational, wasteful, insane. Vaylor slowly looked back toward Earth. For the first time in centuries, uncertainty touched his thoughts. Not because humans had won. They hadn't. Not even close. But because the war was already moving in a direction he did not understand. And somewhere in the darkness beyond Saturn, human fleets were still waiting. They hadn't seen what humans would do next. The wreckage of monitoring Fleet 7 drifted silently near Saturn's rings. Burning hull fragments rotated through frozen clouds of debris while shattered Zarvath cruisers bled atmosphere into the void. Thousands of dead soldiers floated between broken metal structures that had once belonged to the most feared empire in the galaxy. And hidden among the debris, human ships waited without lights, without signals, without fear. They're still here, whispered Tactical Officer Renick aboard the Zarvath flagship. Commander Vaylor stared at the battlefield hologram in disbelief. Human vessels appeared and disappeared between the drifting wreckage like predators inside deep water. No formation. No identifiable command structure. No tactical consistency. Every military doctrine the Empire had mastered over 12,000 years suddenly felt useless. How many ships did they lose? Vaylor asked. Renick hesitated. We are uncertain. The commander turned sharply. Uncertain. The humans used civilian mining vessels alongside military destroyers. Some ships detonated intentionally after impact. Others disabled their own signatures before collision. We cannot determine which were military assets and which were sacrifices. Silence spread through the chamber. The Zarvath Empire calculated warfare with mathematical precision. Every battle was measured through efficiency ratios, resource conservation, and survival projections. But humans were introducing variables that made no sense. They were treating ships like ammunition. One younger officer spoke carefully. Commander, no rational species would willingly ram capital warships. Vaylor's eyes remained fixed on Earth's tactical map. Then perhaps, he said slowly, rationality is no longer an advantage. The room went quiet. Far below, humanity launched its second phase. Without warning, dozens of abandoned cargo freighters suddenly activated near Mars orbit. Zarvath scanners initially ignored them, assuming they were evacuation debris. Then the freighters accelerated directly into the Empire's forward supply lines. Impact alert. The first collision vaporized an entire ammunition convoy. The second detonated fuel reserves large enough to blind every nearby sensor array. The third carried nuclear payloads hidden beneath civilian markings. A chain reaction erupted across the Zarvath formation. Flames spread through space itself. Shockwaves hammered nearby destroyers. Entire communication grids collapsed instantly. Human voices suddenly flooded every emergency frequency. Not military commands. Music. Old human war songs echoed across the battlefield while distorted voices repeated the same phrase again and again. You wanted Earth. Boom. Now you have humanity. Another explosion consumed 2 carriers. Vaylor felt something unfamiliar tightening in his chest. Confusion. Not from the attacks themselves. From the mindset behind them. Humans were not trying to preserve the battlefield. They were poisoning it. Turning every asteroid, civilian ship, and piece of debris into a weapon. The Empire's perfect invasion formation was beginning to collapse under pure unpredictability. And then came the footage. A surviving drone transmitted visuals from the Saturn engagement. The chamber watched silently. Human ships had hidden motionless inside frozen wreckage fields for over 18 hours without power signatures. When Zarvath patrols entered scanning range, the humans ignited engines at point-blank distance and slammed directly into enemy formations before opening fire from inside the explosion radius. One human cruiser continued fighting after losing half its structure. Another rotated manually just to fire damaged railguns one final time before impact. And then the final clip appeared. A human pilot. Young. Bleeding heavily. Her cockpit burning around her. The alien officers expected panic. Instead, she smiled into the recording. You still think we scare easy? Her ship accelerated directly toward a Zarvath dreadnought. The recording ended in white light. Several officers physically recoiled. One whispered quietly, "Why would she do that?" Vaylor answered before anyone else could. Because she believed it would matter. That realization disturbed him more than the attack itself. Most species feared death above all things. Humans weaponized it. Earth's defenses continued collapsing throughout the day, but the invasion was no longer progressing cleanly. Every victory created another hidden disaster. Zarvath troops secured empty cities rigged with delayed explosives. Supply convoys vanished inside asteroid corridors. Human forces abandoned territory only after poisoning infrastructure and destroying navigation systems behind them. Even worse, humans kept broadcasting. Every intercepted transmission carried the same calm confidence that now infected the minds of Zarvath commanders. One message came from a human marine unit trapped beneath the ruins of a destroyed orbital elevator. We're surrounded. Laughter filled the background. Good. Saves us time finding them. Another transmission emerged from a dying Earth battleship moments before destruction. To any surviving fleets, make them remember this system. Then silence. Vaylor muted the recordings. The chamber no longer looked victorious. No one laughed anymore. Even Admiral Sirac's confidence had started fading. These humans, Sirac said carefully, they are not behaving according to survival logic. No, Vaylor replied quietly. They are behaving according to something far more dangerous. Earth rotated silently beneath them. Billions of humans still alive. Still resisting. Still functioning. That was impossible. Most civilizations psychologically collapsed within hours of orbital bombardment. But humanity's communication networks were becoming more aggressive the longer the war continued, as if pressure was strengthening them instead of breaking them. Then came the report that changed everything. A tactical officer rushed into the chamber visibly shaken. "Commander, we discovered why the human fleets scattered." Vaylor turned immediately. "Explain." The officer activated a star map. Hundreds of blinking signals appeared across the outer system. Vaylor's expression hardened instantly. Those were not random fleet movements. They were coordinated attack positions, hidden fuel caches, trap corridors, fallback ambush zones. Humanity had prepared the entire solar system for war long before the invasion began. Asteroid belts had been hollowed into weapons platforms. Mining stations concealed missile arrays. Even moons carried underground railgun systems invisible to long-range scans. This was never a desperate defense. It was a battlefield designed years in advance. The realization spread through the chamber like poison. "They knew someone would come," one officer whispered. "No," Vaylor said slowly. His eyes locked onto Earth. "They knew eventually. Everyone would." At that exact moment, emergency alarms screamed across the flagship. A massive energy spike erupted behind the Zarvath fleet near Jupiter orbit. Thousands of human ships emerged from hidden positions in total silence. Not retreating fleets. Reserve fleets. Fresh. Waiting. An intercepted human transmission echoed across every command deck in the Empire. The voice was calm, cold, and terrifyingly confident. Phase 1 complete. Vaylor felt genuine fear for the very first time, because suddenly he understood the horrifying truth. Humanity had not been losing this war. They had been shaping it. And the real battle was only beginning. Phase 2 authorized. The human transmission spread across the solar system like a death sentence. Moments later, the darkness near Jupiter came alive. Thousands of hidden human warships ignited simultaneously, flooding space with engine fire so bright that Zarvath sensor arrays temporarily overloaded. Massive carrier groups emerged from behind the gas giant, while stealth destroyers rose from beneath frozen moon shadows. Commander Vaylor stared at the tactical display in stunned silence. The humans had hidden an entire war fleet inside their own solar system. Not a survival fleet. Not an evacuation force. An execution force. How did we miss this? Admiral Sirac demanded. No one answered, because everyone already knew. The humans had never tried to match Zarvath technology directly. Instead, they buried weapons inside terrain, civilian infrastructure, and abandoned mining systems. They hid fleets where logical species would never look because no rational empire would prepare for war on this scale before first contact. But humanity clearly had. And now the Empire was trapped inside a battlefield humans had designed years earlier. Multiple high-velocity launches detected. Vaylor turned sharply. Hundreds of human projectiles accelerated from Jupiter's moon network directly into the heart of the Zarvath fleet. At first glance, they looked like missiles. They weren't. They were asteroids. Entire mining colonies had secretly converted moon fragments into relativistic weapons. The rocks accelerated so fast they bypassed standard defense calculations completely. The first impact erased 12 Zarvath destroyers instantly. No explosion. No dramatic fireball. The ships simply ceased to exist. The The second asteroid punched through a carrier formation and continued traveling for another 4,000 kilometers before disintegrating. Chaos erupted across the Empire's command structure. Break formation. Collision alerts everywhere. We can't predict the trajectories. Human voices suddenly flooded emergency channels again. Only this time, they sounded different. Confident. Hungry. One transmission repeated across every frequency. Welcome to human warfare. Another asteroid slammed into a command cruiser. The tactical map flickered violently. Entire sections of the Zarvath invasion force disappeared from existence within minutes. Vaylor forced himself to remain calm. The Empire still possessed overwhelming numbers. Still possessed superior technology. Still controlled Earth orbit. And yet, something invisible was happening to his officers. They were hesitating. Zarvath commanders who once moved with machine-like certainty now questioned every order before executing it. Every asteroid field looked dangerous. Every drifting cargo ship felt suspicious. The humans had infected them with uncertainty. And uncertainty killed empires. Then the human counterattack truly began. Small strike groups suddenly appeared deep behind Zarvath supply lines. Not through stealth technology. Through recklessness. Human ships accelerated directly through dangerous gravitational zones the Empire considered too unstable for combat navigation. Entire squadrons slingshot around moons and debris fields at suicidal speeds before striking vulnerable logistics vessels. "They're violating safe flight limits," an officer whispered. Vaylor clenched his jaw. Humans ignored acceptable risk calculations entirely. That made them impossible to predict. A damaged Zarvath captain appeared on screen from a burning frigate. They came through the debris storms. Static crackled behind him. "Commander, they're using their own wreckage as cover. We can't establish targeting locks." Explosions shook the transmission. And their pilots, they don't disengage. The screen went black. Another fleet lost. Another commander dead. Meanwhile, Earth's resistance only intensified. Human civilians actively assisted military operations instead of fleeing from them. Cargo pilots rammed alien landing craft. Communication engineers rerouted orbital defense systems manually while entire cities lost power around them. Even worse, the humans were adapting faster than the Empire could respond. Every Zarvath tactic only worked once. After that, humans changed instantly. Predictive bombardments failed because human forces abandoned positions minutes before impact. Ambushes collapsed because humans intentionally baited traps only to detonate hidden explosives beneath both sides. It was madness. Calculated madness. And somewhere deep inside himself, Vaylor finally admitted a terrifying possibility. The Empire no longer understood the enemy. A new transmission arrived from the surface of Earth. This time it showed a human woman standing inside a shattered military bunker. Dust fell from the ceiling behind her while warning sirens screamed non-stop. She looked exhausted, but not defeated. "You know the funny thing," she said calmly. "Your empire thinks war is about control." She laughed softly. Humans learned a long time ago that war is really about endurance. A distant explosion shook the bunker. "We don't need to win today." Another tremor. "We just need to make you regret tomorrow." Signal lost. No one in the chamber spoke afterward. Because for the first time, the officers realized the humans were not trying to survive invasion. They were trying to traumatize the invaders. And it was working. Reports of psychological instability spread rapidly across Zarvath forces. Some crews refused to approach abandoned human vessels. Others opened fire on harmless debris after false sensor readings triggered panic responses. One destroyer accidentally destroyed 2 Allied ships after mistaking evacuation transports for disguised human bombs. Fear was spreading. Not among humans. Among the Empire. Then came the moment that shattered remaining confidence. Long-range scanners detected a massive human fleet approaching from beyond Pluto. Vaylor initially assumed it was another hidden reserve force. But the readings made no sense. The ships were ancient. Old human colony vessels. Terraforming carriers. Civilian transports. Thousands of them. What are they doing? Serac asked nervously. The answer arrived seconds later. Every ship accelerated directly toward the Zarvath invasion force. Maximum burn. No evasive patterns. No retreat options. Vaylor's eyes widened in horror. They're turning civilian fleets into weapons. The human armada surged forward like a tidal wave. Some vessels carried explosives. Others carried scrap metal accelerated into shotgun-like destruction fields. One massive colony carrier detonated itself beside a Zarvath battleship so violently the explosion illuminated half of lunar orbit. And through it all, human transmissions continued broadcasting calmly. You thought fear would save you resources. Boom. But humans learned something different. Another explosion consumed a cruiser. The fastest way to end a war. A burning civilian ship rammed directly into an alien command platform. Is to convince the enemy they should never have started one. The tactical display inside Vaylor's chamber descended into chaos. Red warning symbols spread everywhere. Entire fleet formations collapsed. Supply lines were gone. Communication delays increased. And for the first time in 12,000 years, the ancient Zarvath Empire began retreat calculations. Not because they were losing. Because they were beginning to believe humanity might actually be worse than defeat itself. But then a final report arrived from the outer system. A report so horrifying that the chamber fell completely silent after hearing it. Human deep space fleets had just crossed into Zarvath territory. The humans were no longer defending Earth. They were coming for the Empire itself. And suddenly every officer in the room understood the same terrifying truth. Humanity had stopped fighting like prey. Now they were hunting. They crossed the border? The words barely escaped Commander Vaylor's mouth. No one answered immediately, because the tactical officers were still trying to process the impossible. Human fleets had breached Zarvath frontier space less than 11 days after the invasion of Earth began. No species had ever counterattacked the Empire this quickly. Most civilizations spent months defending their own systems before collapsing entirely. Humanity had done the opposite. They attacked back harder. The war chamber dimmed as emergency maps flooded every display. Red warning markers now stretched across multiple Zarvath sectors far beyond Sol. Mining worlds burning. Supply stations destroyed. Communications relays offline. Entire patrol groups missing. Vaylor felt the cold weight of realization settling into his mind. The humans had never intended to contain the war. They intended to spread it. How are they navigating our territory? Admiral Serac demanded. They've never seen our star maps. A navigation officer answered nervously. They're using captured drives and stolen fleet data from destroyed patrol ships. Another pause. And they appear to be learning while advancing. Of course they were. That was the part Vaylor hated most. Humans adapted faster under pressure. The more chaotic the battlefield became, the more dangerous they grew. Suddenly another transmission forced itself onto the main display. A Zarvath colony governor appeared on screen shaking violently. Fires burned behind him while alarms screamed throughout the facility. They came from nowhere, the governor gasped. Commander, these are not military raids anymore. The screen shifted toward a devastated city. Human soldiers moved through smoke-covered streets beside armored machines built from both human and alien wreckage. Some wore damaged equipment patched together from battlefield debris. Others carried weapons clearly modified mid-combat. Improvised. Unstable. Effective. The governor's breathing grew erratic. They don't advance like civilized armies. They move through infrastructure, power systems, maintenance tunnels. A violent explosion shook the recording. They turn everything into a weapon. The signal died. Silence consumed the chamber again. One younger officer finally whispered what everyone feared. They're contaminating the Empire. Vaylor slowly looked up. That was exactly what humans were doing. Wherever they fought, Order collapsed. Rules vanished. Predictability died. Entire military doctrines stopped functioning because humans ignored assumptions every advanced species depended on. Supply routes were no longer safe. Retreat paths were traps. Civilian zones became battlegrounds overnight. And worst of all, humans seemed completely comfortable inside chaos. The Empire was not. Another report arrived moments later. A Zarvath battle group near the Varian corridor had cornered a smaller human fleet beside a dead moon. Standard containment maneuver. Total victory probability, 94%. Then the humans transmitted a single message. You should run. The alien commanders ignored it. 3 minutes later, the moon exploded. The humans had planted mining charges inside its core weeks earlier using captured civilian freighters. The blast destroyed both fleets and destabilized the entire corridor, permanently cutting one of the Empire's main trade arteries. Vaylor stared at the casualty numbers in disbelief. They sacrificed themselves, Serac muttered. No, Vaylor said quietly. They sacrificed the battlefield. That was the true horror. Humans treated war differently than every known species. To the Zarvath, battlefields were assets to preserve after victory. To humans, battlefields were disposable. Entire star systems could burn if it meant the enemy suffered more. And slowly, terrifyingly, that philosophy was infecting the Empire's own thinking. Officers argued more frequently now. Some demanded orbital extermination of Earth immediately. Others wanted strategic withdrawal. Several commanders outright refused further close-range engagement with human fleets after witnessing suicidal attack patterns. Fear had become operational. Then came the recordings from the frontier worlds. The first showed human marines storming a Zarvath weapons depot while under overwhelming fire. One soldier carried another despite severe injuries while laughing hysterically through explosions. The second showed human engineers converting captured alien reactors into bombs within hours. But the third recording changed everything. A Zarvath survivor sat trembling inside a damaged bunker after escaping a human assault. His armor was cracked. His eyes unfocused. They kept advancing, he whispered. Nobody in the chamber moved. We destroyed their lead units. They just climbed over the bodies and kept moving. His breathing became unstable. They were screaming at each other the whole time. Joking, laughing. He looked directly into the camera. I don't think humans fear death. The transmission ended. No officer spoke afterward. Because deep down, they had started reaching the same conclusion. Humanity's greatest weapon was not technology. It was psychological endurance. The Empire had ruled for millennia because fear always broke opponents eventually. But humans had evolved inside fear. Lived with it. Adapted to it. Weaponized it. And now the Zarvath Empire was discovering what happened when intimidation stopped working against a species that survived nightmares long before reaching the stars. Then Earth struck another blow. Without warning, hidden human sabotage teams activated across occupied territories inside the Sol system. Stations previously declared secure erupted into coordinated violence. Dockyards exploded. Atmospheric processors failed. Even Zarvath AI systems began malfunctioning after human cyberattacks infected military networks with corrupted tactical data. One fleet accidentally jumped directly into a collapsing gravity well after navigation systems were altered by human infiltrators. Entire crews vanished instantly. Panic spread faster after that. Not open panic. Worse. Quiet panic. The kind officers hid behind discipline while secretly questioning every order. Vaylor saw it in their eyes now. The uncertainty. The exhaustion. The growing realization that humanity was changing them. A tactical analyst approached carefully. Commander, there is another problem. Vaylor barely looked at him. Speak. The humans are broadcasting our casualties. The room stiffened immediately. Every destroyed ship. Every dead commander. Every failed operation. Human networks pushed the information across neutral systems faster than the Empire could suppress it. For the first time in centuries, The galaxy was watching Zarvath forces bleed, watching them struggle, watching them fear, and humanity made sure everyone saw it. Another transmission suddenly hijacked the chamber screens. A human admiral appeared surrounded by dim red lighting aboard a damaged warship. He looked exhausted, scarred, completely calm. "You built your empire on the belief that fear makes civilizations obedient," he said. Behind him, crew members worked silently around burning consoles. But humans learned something different on Earth. The admiral leaned forward slightly. "The more afraid we are," warning sirens echoed across the ship, "the more dangerous we become." The signal ended. At that exact moment, long-range sensors detected something massive entering the outer Sol system. Vaylor's blood froze. More human fleets. Not dozens. Not hundreds. Thousands. Fresh ships from hidden colonies beyond explored space. Reinforcements humanity never revealed. The tactical officer's voice shook. "Commander, humanity may have prepared for this war for generations." Vaylor stared at Earth below, then at the endless wave of incoming human vessels. And for the first time in 12,000 years, the ancient Zarvath Empire understood something horrifying. They were no longer fighting a civilization. They were fighting a species that had been expecting monsters long before the Empire arrived. And now humanity had finally found one worthy of becoming an example. Retreat is no longer mathematically impossible. The sentence shattered the war chamber. No one moved after hearing it. For 12,000 years, the Zarvath Empire had never spoken the word retreat during an active planetary conquest. Entire civilizations surrendered at the mere appearance of their fleets. Their admirals studied victory the way lesser species studied survival. But now Imperial strategists were calculating escape routes from humanity. Commander Vaylor stood motionless before the tactical display while thousands of warning signals pulsed across the hologram of known space. Human fleets continued advancing through Imperial territory faster than predictions allowed. Every hour brought another disaster. Another colony lost. Another supply route destroyed. Another commander gone. And worst of all, another psychological collapse. The reports no longer described military defeats. They described fear. A frontline officer appeared on screen breathing heavily through cracked armor. "We secured the station exactly as ordered," he whispered. The recording shook violently. Then the humans vented the entire reactor sector. Vaylor narrowed his eyes. Did they sacrifice their own troops? The officer stared silently for several seconds. Then came the answer nobody wanted. They were still inside. The chamber fell completely silent. Another transmission arrived moments later from a surviving carrier group near the border sectors. The footage showed human ships drifting lifelessly through debris fields. Dead. Destroyed. Harmless. Or so the Zarvath believed. The carrier group moved closer for salvage operations. Then every destroyed human vessel activated simultaneously. Hidden explosives detonated point-blank across the alien formation while boarding teams erupted from wreckage compartments the Empire never bothered scanning. The recording dissolved into screams and static. Vaylor slowly closed his eyes. Humans were no longer fighting battles. They were rewriting the concept of warfare itself. Nothing could be trusted anymore. Not debris. Not retreating fleets. Not civilian signals. Not even victory. Because every success against humanity somehow transformed into another trap later. And deep inside the minds of Zarvath commanders, exhaustion was beginning to replace confidence. Admiral Serac finally broke the silence. "They planned this," he said quietly. Vaylor looked at him. "Not just defenses. Not just hidden fleets. Their psychology. Their behavior. Their entire species." He pointed toward Earth's hologram. They knew fear-based empires would eventually come. Nobody disagreed, because the evidence was everywhere now. Human cities were built with underground military infrastructure hidden beneath civilian populations. Entire asteroid belts had been converted into fallback kill zones decades earlier. Even their entertainment media contained invasion scenarios, resistance doctrines, and survival strategies. The humans had imagined this war thousands of times before it ever happened. And somehow, reality made them stronger. Suddenly, the chamber alarms screamed. Emergency transmission from Zarvath Prime. Every officer turned instantly. The Empire's capital world appeared on screen for the first time since the invasion began. And it was burning. Massive explosions lit the skies above the ancient Imperial city while orbital defense rings collapsed one after another. Human strike fleets maneuvered aggressively through the debris, bypassing defensive protocols with tactics so reckless that Imperial AI systems failed to predict them entirely. They reached the capital, someone whispered. Impossible. No enemy fleet had entered core Imperial territory in over 7,000 years. Yet humanity had done it in less than 2 weeks. A terrified Imperial minister appeared through static. They attacked civilian communication grids first, she said frantically. They're broadcasting across every public network. The feed shifted. A human voice echoed across the Empire's capital world. Steady. Terrifyingly controlled. You wanted humanity to feel helpless. Explosions thundered in the distance. Now you understand what helplessness actually feels like. The transmission cut. Panic spread visibly through the chamber. Not fear of death. Fear of realization. The Empire finally understood what humanity was trying to do. This was not revenge. This was education. Humans wanted the galaxy to remember this war forever. And they were succeeding. Another tactical officer rushed forward. Commander, we intercepted communications between neutral systems. Vaylor looked up sharply. Well, the officer hesitated. They're beginning to side with humanity. That hit harder than any battlefield report. The Zarvath Empire ruled through intimidation. Neutral worlds obeyed because resistance seemed hopeless. But humanity had done the impossible. They proved the Empire could bleed. Now entire sectors were questioning Zarvath dominance for the first time in recorded history. Rebellions ignited overnight. Trade alliances collapsed. Occupied species sabotaged Imperial infrastructure from within. The Empire's greatest weapon, fear, was dying. And humanity was killing it publicly. Then came the moment that truly broke the chamber. A surviving scout fleet transmitted footage from the frontier massacre at Draenos Gate. The officers watched in silence. Thousands of Zarvath ships surrounded a smaller human fleet near a collapsing nebula. Total encirclement. Certain victory. The human commander transmitted one final message. You still don't understand us. Then the humans shut down their own navigation systems. Every ship accelerated directly into the unstable nebula storm. The Zarvath pursued immediately. That was the mistake. Human pilots manually navigated through radiation fields considered impossible for combat operations. Their ships collided intentionally with unstable gas pockets, igniting chain reactions throughout the nebula itself. The entire region exploded into a firestorm of plasma and gravitational collapse. Hundreds of Zarvath vessels vanished instantly. The humans died too. But not before trapping the Empire inside a cosmic inferno. The surviving scout's voice trembled during the recording. They knew they wouldn't survive. The footage shook violently. They just wanted to make sure we didn't either. The chamber remained silent long after the transmission ended. Commander Vaylor finally understood the truth. Humanity's greatest strength was not their weapons. Not their fleets. Not even their unpredictability. It was their willingness to suffer if it meant the enemy suffered more. The Empire had never encountered a species that viewed pain as acceptable collateral. Humans did. And now that realization infected every surviving commander. Another officer stepped forward carefully. Commander, some fleets are refusing engagement orders. Vaylor wasn't surprised. The psychological collapse had already begun. Entire crews now hesitated before entering combat zones. Pilots abandoned formations after false sensor readings triggered panic responses. Soldiers openly discussed surrender rather than facing human boarding units. The invincible Zarvath Empire was developing fear. Not fear of losing. Fear of humans themselves. Then the final report arrived. Long-range deep space arrays detected something emerging from beyond known human territory. At first, the signatures appeared wrong. Too massive. Too numerous. Then the calculations finished. The tactical officer turned pale. "Commander." His voice cracked. "These aren't reserve fleets." Vaylor stared at the data. Human war production worlds. Entire hidden systems humanity never revealed to the galaxy. Shipyards larger than imperial capitals. Manufacturing outputs beyond wartime projections. The horrifying truth finally became unavoidable. Humanity had not mobilized fully. Not even close. Everything the Empire suffered so far had only been humanity's opening response. And somewhere beyond the darkness, the real human war machine was finally waking up. We were wrong about humans. The confession echoed across the shattered throne chamber of the Zarvath Empire. No one spoke afterward. Not the admirals. Not the ministers. Not even the ancient imperial rulers connected to the throne network itself. Because outside the capital world, the Empire was dying. And everyone knew it. Massive holographic maps flickered violently as entire sectors vanished from imperial control one after another. Human fleets continued advancing through the galaxy with terrifying momentum, leaving behind broken military infrastructure and collapsing political systems. The invincible empire that had ruled for 12,000 years was unraveling in less than a month. Not because humanity was stronger technologically. Because humanity fought differently. Commander Vaylor stood silently near the central war display, barely recognizing the Empire anymore. Every principal Zarvath civilization depended on had failed. Fear failed. Control failed. Predictability failed. Humanity broke all of it. A nearby officer whispered nervously, "Another border fleet surrendered." Nobody reacted. That had become normal now. Entire fleets abandoned positions rather than engage human strike groups directly. Soldiers destroyed their own ships to avoid boarding encounters. Some commanders even fled before battle began after hearing rumors of human close combat assaults. Rumors. That was another human weapon. Stories spread faster than fleets. Stories about humans surviving impossible injuries. About soldiers fighting after losing limbs. About civilian populations rebuilding bombed cities overnight while continuing weapons production beneath the ruins. Some stories were exaggerated. Many were not. And the fear they created was devastating. Another transmission forced itself onto the chamber display. A surviving Zarvath officer appeared surrounded by darkness aboard a drifting escape pod. His eyes looked hollow. "We captured one alive," he whispered. The chamber focused immediately. The officer's breathing shook uncontrollably. "We thought interrogation would reveal their command structure." He laughed weakly. "It just made things worse." Commander Vaylor stepped closer. "What happened?" The survivor stared into the camera with pure terror. "The human asked us why we were afraid." Silence. He couldn't understand why we kept retreating. The officer's voice cracked completely. He thought humanity was still losing. No one moved. Because that was the moment the Empire finally understood the full psychological horror of humanity. Humans genuinely believed they had been holding back. Another emergency alert interrupted the silence. Orbital defense rings above Zarvath Prime were collapsing. Again. Human fleets pierced through the final defensive perimeter using stolen Imperial access codes combined with tactics so irrational that automated systems failed to process them correctly. One human cruiser deliberately detonated itself inside a shield generator corridor just to create an opening large enough for smaller ships to enter. Another physically rammed a capital defense station while broadcasting music across every communication channel. Not victory chants. Not military propaganda. Music. As if they wanted the Empire to remember the sound forever. Vaylor watched the battle unfold above the capital. Burning debris rained across the skies of the ancient throne world while human ships advanced through the chaos like predators completely adapted to destruction. No hesitation. No fear. No mercy. The Empire had spent centuries believing advanced civilizations evolved beyond emotional warfare. Humanity proved the opposite. Emotion was their warfare. Rage, defiance, grief, loyalty. Every feeling the Zarvath considered primitive had become fuel for the most terrifying military force the galaxy had ever seen. Then the throne network activated. The ancient imperial consciousness finally spoke. For thousands of years, the rulers of Zarvath rarely addressed military chambers directly. Their decisions were absolute, their confidence unquestioned. But now their collective voice carried something impossible: fear. How many human fleets remain? The throne asked quietly. The tactical chamber froze. No one answered immediately, because the numbers kept changing. Every destroyed fleet revealed another hidden fleet later. Every captured human database exposed more shipyards, more colonies, more manufacturing worlds. Humanity had buried its true size beneath centuries of isolation. Finally, a strategist answered carefully. We no longer know. That sentence broke something inside the chamber. The Empire measured everything, calculated everything, controlled everything. But humans introduced the one variable the Zarvath could never survive: uncertainty. Another transmission suddenly hijacked every screen across the capital world. A human admiral appeared once again, scarred, exhausted, completely calm. Behind him stood rows of damaged soldiers preparing for another deployment. Some wore bandages. Others carried improvised weapons assembled from battlefield scrap. None looked afraid. The admiral spoke slowly. You thought humanity feared extinction. His eyes locked onto the camera. But extinction has been chasing us since the beginning. The room remained silent. Every generation on Earth survived something that should have destroyed us. Images flashed briefly behind him. Wars, plagues, fires, collapsing cities, starving populations, then modern human fleets burning across the galaxy. We learned something after all those centuries. The Admiral stepped closer. The universe does not reward the strongest species. Distant explosions thundered behind him. It rewards the species that refuses to stay down. The transmission ended. No one in the throne chamber spoke afterward, because every Zarvath mind reached the same realization simultaneously. Humanity could not be psychologically conquered. Fear strengthened them. Loss enraged them. Pressure united them. The Empire's greatest weapon had become useless the moment it encountered humans. Then came the final report. The outer defense systems detected humanity's primary war fleets arriving outside the capital system. Not strike groups. Not raiders. The real fleets. Endless lines of warships stretched across space like an iron storm. Carriers larger than cities emerged beside planet-cracking siege platforms humanity had hidden beyond explored space for generations. The chamber stared in horror. Humanity truly had been holding back. Commander Vaylor finally closed his eyes. Every warning sign had existed from the beginning. The calm human broadcasts. The prepared solar system. The willingness to sacrifice everything. This species never expected peace to last forever. They expected monsters eventually. And when the galaxy's oldest empire arrived, humanity simply became the nightmare it had prepared to be. The throne consciousness spoke one final time. Softly. Broken. Transmit across all surviving systems. An officer hesitated. What message shall we send? The ancient rulers stared at the burning image of their collapsing empire. Then came the sentence that would spread across the galaxy for the next 1,000 years. Never fight humans again. The emergency broadcast erupted through every known star system as humanity's fleets entered the capital orbit. Civilizations across the galaxy watched the mighty Zarvath Empire surrender in real time. They watched ancient rulers beg for ceasefire terms from a species they once called primitive. And far beyond the battlefield, new alien civilizations quietly erased every invasion plan involving Earth. Because humanity had taught the galaxy something terrifying. Humans were not the strongest species. They were worse. They were the species that survived everything. And if pushed far enough, they made sure nobody survived unchanged.